guys, and welcome back to another video review. I'm actually doing a lot of these lately, so good job me. Didn't think I would be doing as many of these, but you know, I'm doing this one on another one of my books from my back to school book haul, and this is Monique and the Mango Rains by Kris Holloway. This is another memoir, which I know, weird for me, but I really went back and forth on doing a review for this book at all. And then we discussed it in my class yesterday, and I realized that I really did need to do a review of this book for so many reasons. So this book is written by a Peace Corps worker who spends 2 years in Mali, in a village that I cannot pronounce, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce because it'll be bad. She is partnered with a young midwife named Monique, who is trapped in a loveless marriage and bound by all these African traditions, and she's in love with someone else. And so while, yes, this book takes place in Mali while on Peace Corps work, it's really about Kris's relationship with Monique, and that is definitely where the strength of this novel comes in. I suppose it's a memoir. There's a quote from Anne Fadman on the back, who's a really great essayist and memoirist herself, and she says that there have been many accounts of studying people from other cultures, but few actually being friends with them. Anyone who's curious about what such a friendship feels like from the inside should read this respectful but intimate account. And 99% of the way, this is how I feel about this book. I was reading it for a class where I got to learn more about the background information that Kris doesn't include in here. But like from the beginning, and this is not a spoiler because if you read the introduction, Kris tells you that Monique dies, and that's part of the reason why she writes this book is in her memory. So right in the introduction, you know that Monique is going to die, and so everything that you're reading is building up to this point, and you know what's coming. And still, even though I knew that when it came at the end of this book, I was broken. I think I put it down, and I felt Kris's sadness so keenly and felt the loss of Monique so much, even just having spent this small amount of time with both of them. And I was blown away by that, and how much this very simple book made me feel. So if you are into like learning about how Mali and Africa and these kind of people live and their culture and their religion, it's not really so much about that as it is about this individual relationship that is had. And while that is definitely an important part of this book for me, it's also where I got blinded a little bit by it. I think it goes without saying that Kris is white and Monique is African. And whenever you write those kinds of books or read those kinds of books, you have to be aware that there's probably some privilege and bias in there that might not be addressed outright by the author. You hope that it will be, but it isn't always. And in different parts of this, Kris definitely does stand there and address, you know, I don't want to be the white boss. And she talks about how awkward it is to try and navigate how some of Monique's friends treat her like she has white people magic. And so it's addressed. And in this very limited space, I think I just kind of took that for granted, and then as I kept reading, especially near the end, and how Kris deals with and reacts to Monique's death, there's a lot of white privilege that goes into the back of this. And when we talked it over in class, especially, I had noticed what I had noticed, but other people had noticed some things. And it starts to make you a little bit more uncomfortable, especially because of how much Kris never engages in a conversation with Monique's culture. And because Monique is scientifically minded as a midwife and is also Christian, which is the religion that Kris mentions that she is, I think that Kris took the privilege of not having to engage very much with the culture around her. Again, I can't speak to her 2 years in Mali, but in this book in particular, there was no attempt to understand or explain any of the things in the culture that was happening around her and the people. And especially in the end, she seems to project the idea that Monique's death could have been avoided if she hadn't been in Africa. and, you know, was somewhere better. And that's why I said I agree 99% of the way with Anne Fadiman, because Anne Fadiman calls this a respectful but intimate account, and it is certainly intimate, but I'm not sure how respectful this book is to the people of the village where she stayed who weren't Monique, because there is a lot of bias and judgment inflicted by Kris upon these people, and for me this is just frustrating, because no matter how much Kris in real life engaged with the people of Mali over 2 years, she didn't put it in here, and she didn't imbue this book necessarily with a lot of respect for people who weren't Monique, or customs that weren't recognizable to her. And she talked about a couple of instances of her trying to understand, but they didn't go very deep and they didn't go very far. And for the most part, she talked about herself as such a, you know, marvelous experience for the people around her, that I think that while they were trying to interact with her, she didn't feel like she had to learn how to understand them. And that's really frustrating. And that's why I knew that I wanted to do a review of this book, because my initial rating on Goodreads was, I finished it and I said 4 stars because I feel all these emotions about Monique and I love the story and it was so human and so quick and so charming. And then I thought about pushing past that emotional reaction and thinking about how the book dealt with specifics of race relations and stuff like that, and the culture, especially because I am reading this for a spiritual journeys class, so we were talking about African religions, and I have to take that review down at least 1 if not 2 stars. I'm still sitting with this and deciding how much judgment I want to put on Kris, because again, this is a really short book, but the emotional reaction I had to their friendship does not in any way excuse the amount of unacknowledged white privilege and bias that is in this book. So I'm sorry if you saw my Goodreads rating and were misled by how much I liked this book, because I was wrong, and I'm so glad that, you know, I had the opportunity to sit with this book and to think about that, and then also to go into a class environment where we talked about even more instances of bias and privilege that I hadn't even seen, because I want to see these things, and I am glad that that class gave me the opportunity. Just really sad that this book wasn't as respectful as I wanted it to be, even if it is a really, really fantastic story about friendship between 2 people that did make me feel things in the end, and still makes me feel things, but just with a little bit more of an awake sight. That is my review of Monique and the Mango Rains by Kris Holloway. I will be back next week with an actual, like, more something I would read review, and Taylor will be here for that, so that'll be really awesome. We'll be reviewing another short story anthology, and I will finally be able to show you guys that 7-second clip I promised you from when we recorded our after anthology review a couple of weeks ago. So thanks for watching, guys. Bye!